Hello, adventurer. It's good to see you. You have made it to the morning grind.
Welcome, welcome.
It's the live stream at the beginning of the geekverse, where we talk about all types of topics in geekdom, gaming, and fantasy, with an emphasis on being constructive and creating the things that we want to exist in the world.
It's all on the grind, Sizemore. Can't be too fine, can't be too coarse.
That's exactly right. There are a lot of adventures to be had today. Dungeons to explore and monsters to slay, and who knows what a random encounter might send our way. That's why we have to prepare, so settle in now for the morning grind with your favorite beverage in hand.
Tea? Or maybe something a little stronger. I've got a few bottles of the old Wynyard left.
Whatever you want. Pull up a chair.
Dude.
If you're feeling fancy, how about a cappuccino? Or a frappuccino? Or how about an espresso?
Just tea, thank you.
Sounds good to me, Gandalf. Whatever you want. I'm just glad you're here.
Everyone is welcome. You can just watch if you want. You don't have to worship anything you don't want to worship.
Thank you, Mike. But be forewarned.
Sometimes we get really strange characters around here.
Wait, what's that you say? Why can't you come and be a part of the stream?
My wife would disown me.
Oh no, I bet she'll be fine with it. Come on in.
Am I scared for my safety? No.
What are we supposed to do?
Everybody do the secret handshake.
Secret cultist handshake.
Oh, now do wizards who love each other.
Yeah.
This, my friend, is a science.
I still don't have gifts, but it's fine.
It's all on the grind, son. Can't be too fine, can't be too coarse.
Dude, this would be a sick place to bring the band.
Indeed it would be, Dave. It really would. I'm seeing more people coming in. Welcome. Glad to have you here. Oh, look, here's someone new.
Is this the cultist meetup?
Yes it is.
Come to hang out? Please accept me. I have nothing else.
Okay, we accept you. Everyone's welcome here.
Brought some snacks.
Well, that makes things even better.
You want some coffee?
I don't drink coffee.
You sure? It's cultist coffee.
What makes it cultist coffee?
I'm a cultist and I'm drinking it.
Oh. Then I'll have some.
What exactly is going on here?
I'm seeing more people coming in. Welcome. It's so great to have you. Oh, and look, here comes another stranger.
Can we help you?
Yes, fellow cultists. I could really use some food.
Oh yeah? Welcome. We have donuts.
Oh, it's me. I'm glad I'm here. I'm sure you have a few questions for me, though.
What's your name? Who do you work for? What god do you worship?
Great questions, Rob.
I'm Steve King, and I worship Nyarlathotep.
No, not really. I'm just Heath, and I won't be worshiping anything this morning. But I will be your host. Welcome to the office. We're going to have a great time. I've got my coffee ready, because now it's time for the morning grind.
If you could become a fish, that would be amazing. Then I could command you with my mental fish powers.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Good morning. It is great to see you. Welcome to my home. Welcome to the office, and welcome to the morning grind this Sunday here on Memorial Day weekend. I was out late last night because I went to my brother's house. He had a kind of a party. We grilled out. We did hot dogs, hamburgers. We had badminton in the yard. We had all kinds of things going on. So hopefully you will have something like that too. It was a lot of fun. But I was out late, so I'm here now. So let's see who all is here. Lots of people here. We're live streaming on a bunch of different channels because this is cultist related. So we're live streaming on the Cultists channel as well as the Cultists on Facebook. And I just shared this to the Cultist fan group over on Facebook. So we will see who comes on in. It is good to see you. If you are watching one of those channels and you don't know who I am the producer and co-writer of the Cultists, and we're currently working on an RPG for it. And it is fantastic to have you. Ordinarily, we stream the show on the Heath's Geekverse channel, which it is streaming there. But you could be watching elsewhere, and it's great to have you. So, hey, there's PH. Hey, PH, good morning. I'm glad you're here. We're going to go over the magic, do a read-through of the magic that we did last time, because I cleaned it up. And a lot of that was based on your recommendation. So, hey, James, good morning. Good morning. So, yep. Good morning, Lynn. Good morning. Jason, good morning. Tomocrat, gang's all here. Oh, even Sable Phoenix is here. Good morning, Sable Phoenix. And Zero the Blade, Robert, Mike. Fantastic. Fantastic. All right. So, what's been going on? Brianna and I, on Wednesday, we did get the Kickstarter page submitted to Kickstarter for this. So that doesn't mean that it's finished yet, because I've got to get, I'm putting together, I'm not going to launch until, we've got all the beta material and we've done some beta testing and things like this, but I went ahead and submitted. I don't know what the status that is. I feel like I should have heard back. Maybe I have not heard back yet. Of course, this is a weekend, but I wanted it to, I've still got to put the costs of different products in there, all the shirts and things like that. I loaded up all the items. I don't have all of my cost list yet. And that's partially because, like with this book, I don't know the cost to produce this book yet, because we're still writing it, even though we're getting closer to the end. But nonetheless, I submitted it to them for their review. Let's see. Your verification details for the Cultists, a Cthulhu comedy RPG and mockumentary web show have been confirmed. Does that mean that it's approved? I actually do not know. Well, anyway, so I submitted it. Let me see if I go here. What happens when I look here? Oh, it still says the project is in review. Okay, that's fine. Okay, but that's why I went ahead and submitted it, because you don't have to have everything finished before you can submit it. So it says that the project is still in review, but that's fine. I wanted to go ahead and submit it early. That way it'll be in our hands once they approve it. And then whenever we're ready, we're going to do some promotion and things like that. But then we will go live on our schedule, but at least they will have already approved it. I've got videos to make for the page, and I also have to put in the costs of different all the different items that'll be on the page. But it was close enough to say, all right, this is what's going to be, submit to them for review. So, all right, that part is on their hands. Maybe in another couple days they will toss that back here. So that's what's going on there. We did that. Brianna and I did that on Wednesday. We've been writing. And at the winery, I've been learning how to make vodka. I have drunk a lot of vodka over the past week and a half, learning about the manufacture of vodka and tasting a variety of different samples of different vodkas all around. So that was a large part of the last week. A lot of fun. Charles Barkley apparently has his own vodka. I didn't know that. Charles Barkley is around here. Like, went to Auburn here in Alabama, so he's up around the Birmingham area. And Charles Barkley, if you're watching the Morning Grind this morning, your vodka was really good. It's the Redmont vodka. So a lot of the different vodkas that we tasted. Redmont, you did a good job, Charles Barkley. Did a good job. And the Tower vodka out of Texas. So we'll see. All right. So anyway, that was part of what I was doing lately. All right, let's go ahead and breathe and sip. Hey, you might want to sip vodka. Let's do that. Well, ordinarily I'm not either. I mean, I don't really drink a whole lot of vodka. So like I said, this was more vodka than I have drunk, in like a day that I had drunk in my entire life. But yeah, right. Like I didn't really ever, I don't think I had ever just sat and drunk vodka, right? Like, hey, I think I'll just sit here and have some vodka. But the guy who I was talking to and was making the vodka, I mean, the guy who runs the distillery, he knows a lot about this and was talking about the different, just sampling the different vodkas. What are you tasting in it? What they're like. He was even talking about potentially tasting like their filtering mechanism, like how they were filtering different vodkas and things like that. Very interesting. Hey, Offie, good to see you. All right, well, let's do a breathe and sip, and then let's get to this document here. So, everybody, got your drink this morning? Got your favorite beverage? I've got mine. Let's do 2 deep inhales, and then in through the nose, out through the mouth, and then take a sip of your favorite beverage this morning. So here we go. Let's drink. Let's breathe and then sip. Let's breathe. In, here we go. And set. There we go. There we go. Sounds good. Tastes good. All right. Let's bring up our cultist document here. I've still got to figure out, by the way, of course, I'm short on time now, but it still looks like the first thing I want to do is launch this, because this has to do with the cultists. I was talking in the Discord server, the Ravenkeep Discord server, which, by the way, I suppose I should put a link to. I do want to get the coffee shop going again. I just haven't had time. And I think that what we need to do is, here's the Ravenkeep Discord server. Because on top of everything, also trying to organize, an event weekend, that's not working. I think that, we've talked about having the online coffee shop. The online coffee shop is where you come in and play different games, play different tabletop games in an online environment. I would like to be able to just have that open. Oh, hey, Micah. Good morning. Good to see you. To have that available and have games being played there all the time, especially if we're doing the Cultist RPG. We got Hero Quest. We got a bunch of other games built out. And it would be great to just kind of have that open on a rolling basis. So I'm trying to think about that as well. We need more people. So I'm thinking about reaching out maybe tomorrow. I'm going to be here working in the office all day tomorrow. Maybe starting as early as tomorrow, but maybe Wednesday or something like that. Reaching out to other people on YouTube who are developing games and things like that, and seeing if they want to come in and use our coffee shop for gaming and playtesting and things like that. So we will see. Thinking about that, we do really need a rule set. We need our own rule set. We played around with Faded Edge, and I think had come up with some pretty good dice mechanics that are probably ready to go to playtesting. I was talking to my brother about that last night, about what type of game design should happen, how he would modify Hero Quest. We were talking about that last night. So I'm not sure if we need to do that one next, because we could go right into the board game for the Cultist, do our board game design, our social deduction board game, and then relaunch that with season 2 of the Cultist. But maybe there should be some project in between the two Cultist projects. I'm not sure. It may need to be it probably should be a rule set. I don't know. I'm thinking about a lot of different things. All right. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to read the back of this. This is the back of the book, and Brianna did put together the cover of not only the book in general, but the beta playtest released version of it. She put together the covers, and she sent that to me so that I can put together a basic layout for beta testing when we're done here. And we'll have covers. And so this is what went on the back, and I think this is a really great back. So if you were wondering what we're doing, the back of the book, if you picked it up, would say this: you can't summon Cthulhu with sour cream and onion. Is your wand, altar, red hot brand of Cthulhu and greenstone idol ready? No? Well, do you at least have some dice? Yes? Okay, great. That'll be enough. The Cultist role-playing game is a GM optional, rules-light tabletop RPG where you'll portray modern Lovecraftian cultists engaged in absurdist mockumentary-style comedy antics. It seems like the whole world is down on you. It's not that you don't have big plans. You really do. Perhaps you'll learn as much forbidden knowledge as you can and give your brain to Yogg-Sothoth. Maybe you'll dig up your grandfather and try to reanimate him with some poetry from an old book. Or maybe just cut your heart out as a sacrifice to Cthulhu. Well, if your mom would let you have a real knife again, she doesn't understand. Her and the rest of society. They're the problem. Nothing's wrong with you. You know that for sure. No matter what they think, you're carrying on. Yabba zabada, Cthulhu, really. Waggle naggle fatagan. The Cultist RPG is based on The Cultists, a comedy web show about modern-day Lovecraftian cultists who just want to worship Cthulhu and other gods in a world full of people who don't understand. The Cultist is available now on YouTube, playable in 1 to 2 hours. So that's the back, and I think that's pretty good. There were a few adjustments there, but I wanted to I finished that off, and I sent it to Brianna so that she adjusted both files. I moved it over to GM optional. But all right, that's all right. Thank you. So I really like that back. I mean, I think that really captures what this is all about. Okay, we had worked on spells and spell casting last time, and it wasn't finished, but I went through and I polished it. So I'm going to read through it one more time because it's been a few days, but I went through and I finished it based on everything that we had done last time we sat down and worked. I guess that was Wednesday. So it says spells and spell casting. Regardless of whether or not magic and the Elder Gods actually exist, see Magic and the Elder Gods and the Cultists, ritualistic spell casting plays an important part in the Cultists and can at the gaming table as well. Much of the story in the Cultists revolves around and is driven by attempts at casting spells. For instance, episode 2 of the first season, The Trouble with Necromancy, opens with Mike trying to ritualistically commune with Yogg-Sothoth with table salt. It ends with him and Rob using an ancient ritual to attempt to raise the dead. The story arc of the second half of the first season is driven by the Cultists' attempt to summon Cthulhu because they think he will be a valuable ally in their fight against the Cultists of the Yellow King. Summoning Cthulhu requires several steps, each of which is the focus of an episode. First, in episode 7, The Summoning, the Cultists attempt to summon Cthulhu and fail. They determine what might be the cause of their failure, and conduct 2 other rituals to attract Cthulhu's attention before they can attempt a second summoning. In episode 8, The Ritual, the Cultists have a ritualistic orgy. In episode 9, The Branding, the Cultists escalate their attempt to summon Cthulhu dramatically with Rob's branding. This leads to episode 10, To Raise a God, which involves another, ultimately failed attempt to summon Cthulhu. Central to season 2 is Ben's attempt to cast a spell to destroy Steve. Ben makes several gallant efforts, starting with episode 6, Power Word Kill, and culminating with an attempt to cast Phantasmal Killer in episode 10, The Return. Season 2 involves other rituals as well, notably Ben's attempt to call Rob back from the sea, and then his ceremony dedicating himself to Cthulhu. Season 2, Episode 8, At the Water's Edge. Significantly, although the attempts to cast these spells drive the story, none of them actually work. Further, even though the spells fail, the story is still brought to a successful and satisfying conclusion. For instance, even though the Cultists failed to summon Cthulhu at the end of Season 1, the failed summoning still facilitates the conclusion of the story and Ben's narrative arc. Regardless of the effectiveness of spells in the game, spell casting should not be easy. There are a number of different elements that spell casting might require. Players can use these and other elements to make spell casting difficult and add complications to the game. Generally, the greater magical effect the Cultists are trying to produce, the more difficult it should be. However, there is also plenty of comedic absurdity in the Cultists trying to do something that could easily be accomplished through ordinary means, but instead are trying to use an elaborate magical ritual. When trying to develop the techniques necessary to cast the spell, consider the following potential casting requirements. 1. Special items or spell components. Spells may require components ranging from the mundane and ordinary to the seasonal or even the very limited edition. A spell might not require just any coffee, but a pumpkin latte, and it is the middle of the summer. A spell might require not just any coffee, but a pumpkin latte, and it is the middle of the summer. Potato chips are easy to acquire. That should probably be but. Oh, but a pumpkin latte, and it is the middle of summer. I think that works. A spell might require not just any coffee, but a pumpkin latte, and it's the middle of the summer. Potato chips are easy to acquire, but what do you do when you need an Easter peep at Thanksgiving? Even a mundane item might be made more interesting by requiring it to be obtained in a strange way. Spells that target another character may require a personal object of theirs to be the focus of the spell. This might be a piece of clothing or something more personal like their toothbrush. Obtaining this item could be a story arc in and of itself. 2. Ritual casting methods. Spells in the Cultists are often not inconspicuous. Casting a spell usually requires dancing, chanting, grunting, bizarre gestures, and even extravagant clothing. Casting such a spell will draw the attention of the mundane world. These spells are hardly instantaneous either. Rituals could go on for several minutes or even hours. 3. Dedicated time to cast. Spells cannot be cast anytime the Cultists want. Different spells may be linked to different certain times, such as the end of the day, the time of year, or even only be cast once a century when the stars are in certain alignment. Putting a time constraint on the casting of a spell is a wonderful way to drive action in the story. If the Cultists miss the casting time, they can't just try again. Keep the pressure on. 4. Required locations. Spells can't be cast just anywhere. They require a lot of magical power, and so the Cultists may have to draw upon a certain location that is thought to be magically infused. To cast the spell, the Cultists must draw upon this power. Locations could be as simple as the bird feeder in the park or as difficult to get into as the basement of the local middle school, and the principal is definitely not in your cult. 5. Required sacrifices, sub-rituals, quests, and ordeals. Many spells cannot simply be cast straight away. Many will require other rituals to be performed in advance. As Mike says, you can't just summon Cthulhu out of nowhere. He has to really get to know you first. Preparatory rituals might require sacrificing your sister's favorite Care Bear or your neighbor's beloved pet. Other rituals might require personal cleansing, which could include bathing in an inappropriate place, of course, temporary tattooing, swearing off your favorite food, or undergoing facial branding. One of the spellcasters might even have to face an intense ordeal to prove his worth, like going to a family reunion, a christening, or being unable to tell a lie for 24 hours. Special knowledge. Some spells might require special knowledge and research to cast. These materials might be written in a language or code that only dedicated cultists can read or even recognize as existing. This knowledge is not easy to obtain. It might only be taught by an esoteric teacher that not only must be sought out, but convinced of your worthiness. All of the above can be combined in any combination. Perhaps the necessary spells can be cast only at noon at a special site, which happens to have a Taco Bell built on top of it, and require extravagant dances with an oversized fish headdress and a lot of glitter. So there we go. That's what we did last time. So that's cleaned up, written through. I didn't finished all of the polishing all the words and things like that last time. But we went through, and that was basically creating that section on magic and spells based on the Barbarians of Lemuria spell casting that PH recommended was basically what we did last time. So I cleaned that up. I'm happy with how that read. I think that's pretty good. I think that works very well. So we are moving along here. So I was trying to start at the beginning and then move through it again. So that gets all of the getting started done, introduction, game overview, what you need to play. All of that's been done. Character sheet explained. I've got a place in here to put a character sheet, but that'll be something that Brianna does when she's laying this out. How to play. That was basically the end of the how to play section. The structure of story, the beginning of the game, magic and the elder gods, the lead character, establishing scenes, determining the scenes, spells and spell casting. But that's not all of how to play. That was all the structure of stories and scenes. The next section is adjudicating actions. Oh, good morning. Good morning, BGD. Oh, I'm glad you approve, PH, because that was a section that was added on your recommendation. And I think that is an important section. I think it's an important section. I think that's one of the things that that distinguishes this version from this game from other versions of something like Low Stakes, for the main version of Low Stakes. So trying to provide additional information on how to invoke the feel of the web show in it. And I think that does that. I think the two sections, there are two sections on magic. There's just magic and the elder gods and whether or not magic and the elder gods exist. But then that's going to be in some kind of sidebar or something. But then that section on what you need to do with spells and spell casting. We go on to adjudicating actions. Sierra the Blade says, I feel like there is a 0.01 chance someone could break the game because of real world experiences, like being a shinobi with a cooking cover art. It explains all food and area access requirements. Well, that's fine. If somebody knows how to get in and has that, then there you go. Go for it. Adjudicating actions is basically done as well, except for, let's see where I was. So adjudicating actions. Let's go down and look at checks because we were, I needed to change checks because we were dividing. So we understood dividing the section on checks. So we understood a little bit more about it. Headaches, asides. Okay, let's start at the top right here and go through these trouble checks because we had these checks because we decided to actually have a dedicated section on troubles and sways. Trouble checks and sway checks because it was kind of a mishmash and we were trying to get greater clarity on those things. So let's look at that. I didn't quite get finished writing those out, but let's go and finish that draft. So let's see. Adjudicating actions. Although the majority of the game can be managed through spontaneous improvisation, with players exercising their own judgment to determine the success or failure of their endeavors, there are some circumstances where players will use simple rules to adjudicate whether or not important actions are successful. These rules also provide a structure to inject complications and humor into the game. To do this, the Cultist RPG uses 2 meta currencies, courage and sway, as well as checks, headaches, and asides. TH says, yes, you got the concept and made it yours. It makes sense to the universe and the show. I agree. There's a lot that I like in that, that we've got in here. The spellcasting, spellcasting in that particular way makes a lot of sense. I like that. I wonder if that can be used for other things. And then also, like I said, I am a fan of this idea of the narrative roles that we've got here. That was introduced in Low Stakes. I think the narrative roles is a very interesting way to do role-playing games rather than doing a character class. You know, the emphasis in a story-driven game is your role in the story, and then you layer on all of your abilities and special stuff on top of that, rather than saying who you are is like all of your special abilities, and then you got to go figure out how you fit into a narrative. I do like, so I mean, there are things in this game that even though it is a simple game, it's intended to be comedic, that has some interesting things to think about in it. Okay, so courage and sway, as well as checks, headaches, and asides. Meta currencies. The Cultist RPG uses 2 meta currencies to manage the game, courage and sway. Okay, so courage. Courage represents a character's inner determination. Player characters start the game with 1 courage point and can earn more as the game progresses. There's no limit to the number of courage points that can be accumulated, but players will want to spend them to improve the chances he or she is successful at checks involving one of their troubles. See checks. So, by the way, if you're coming in, if this is your first one to watch, we're basing this game off of the low stakes rules. So Craig Campbell at Nerdburger Games, published by Nerdburger Games, wrote a RPG called Low Stakes, which was designed for mockumentary style horror, such as he was designing it for What We Do in the Shadows. And so we looked at that on the Morning Grind a couple of times, actually, very early on and then much later to actually delve into it in a bit greater detail. So this game right here, because it was designed for mockumentary style humor, we said, hey, this could really be adapted to the Cultists. And so that's what we've been doing. So we've been making it our own. We've very much been kind of making it our own, but this is an adaptation of Low Stakes. PH says roles instead of classes can be very powerful. That way, you know, even if you're doing something like we're going to have an all wizard party, you know, we're doing a game where we're all going to be wizards or we're all going to be barbarians, you know, or what distinguishes you? Well, it should be your narrative role. So that's what courage is. To improve the chances that he or she is successful at checks involving one of their troubles. See checks on a certain page. Okay. Now, sway. Okay, let's see what it says. Because there is sway and there are sway checks. So sway. These are the meta currencies. Courage was one. Sway is another one. When a character has sway, it means that character has the upper hand among their fellow cultists. I'm having trouble. My throat this morning. When a character has sway, it means that character has the upper hand among their fellow cultists. Perhaps they have impressed the other characters in some way or otherwise earned their respect. Only one player can have sway at a time, and unlike with courage, characters cannot store sway. A character either has it or they do not. If another player gains sway, then it is lost by the player who had it. An easily identifiable token or other object should be used to indicate which player's character has sway at the table. However, if no such token or object is available, sway can be marked on the character sheet. See, this is important here. A player with sway can voluntarily give it to another player to persuade the target character to undertake an action that complies with your character's desires. That character must comply with your character's requests, but in return, he or she gains sway. We should say in here, describe. So that's one way sway is used. Describe how your character uses his or her, do I want to say most positive characteristics? No, well, it doesn't have to be positive because you could be manipulating somebody. How your character uses his or her character traits to get the other player, the other character, to comply. It could be charm. It could be manipulation. It could be charm. It could be manipulation. It could be threatening. But it works. That character must comply with your character's request, but in return, he or she gains sway. Describe how your character uses his or her character traits to get the other character to comply. It could be charm. It could be manipulation. It could be reasoning. Or it could be making a threat. But it works. The target character must comply with your character's requests, but in return, he or she gains sway. You could have a situation in which you may gain Patrick's sway. Now, but that's not a sway check. That's how you use sway. If you got it, then one of the things you can do with it, I think we should say in here, like while you look this up, a character with sway, this is another way, the character with sway rolls additional on all trouble checks. P.YYY. But also so there we go. A character with sway rolls an additional die on all trouble checks. But also a player with sway, or the player with sway, can voluntarily give it to another player to persuade the target character to undertake an action that complies with your character's desires. Micah says, my question about sway is more, what if in or out of character that player doesn't want to do what is requested? Obviously, ideally, a group gets along, but if the offered sway action affects their plan, for example. So do we think there should be a way to counter that? I mean, we talked about how there are some fate-like influences here. Whether or not that was actually something that inspired low stakes at all, I'm not sure. But, I mean, you can see similarities in different kinds of game styles here. So if we talk about fate and you've got to compel on one of your, like your trouble, and okay, now you've got to do something because you are being compelled to do it because that's part of your character traits and your trouble. Ordinarily, you accept. If you accept that, then you get the fate point. That's similar here because here, someone who has sway with the whole group is trying to get you to do something. And if you do it, then your reward is that you get sway after that. That sway goes over to you. If you, in fate, if you reject it, if you say, no, I realize that my character would, under ordinary circumstances, accept this compel, and would do this. But here, I really don't want to do that. then you have to give up a fate point. So you could do something. You could do something like that here, if the player's like, no, I'm not. The player with sway is making their case, and it's like, no, I understand, but I'm not going to do that. You could make that person give up a courage point. So the person with sway keeps it. Didn't work, as long as you have a courage point to give to the other person. What do you think about that? Now, Anon, I completely agree here. Anon says never use game rules to address personal problems at the table. So you're right. So that's what, that's another way this could go. Because, oh, yeah, Sable says that too. Yeah, Anon says for sure. I don't think that's what was being referred to. Yeah, I didn't take it that way, but it could be that what if you're trying to compel something that the player, not the character, but the player for some reason does not want to do. That seems like you're having player table drama. I mean, that sounds like out of game, drama. That, okay, oh my God, this person wants me to do what, and that sounds like I think that does not need to be addressed in these rules, because that just sounds like you're having a problem with players at the table. So I think we could skip that. We could mention that. Now, there were things like that. The original low stakes did have something about that, running the table and dealing with personal issues with different players at the table, which I did not put into this version. But that's, yeah, I guess that came up here because, okay, you're kind of being compelled to do it. Give them, and then they have to. But what if you're not being nice out of game? Well, Sable says, isn't part of the whole thing the opportunity for interscene strife? Yes. That just plays into the whole reality show documentary vibe. If the player with sway then tries to is getting rebuffed. Okay, so then, right. So say Micah says right, which is sort of what I was thinking, but the mechanics as presented don't address that. PH says one could gain a meta currency that would allow them to redirect sway to another action that he intended to do before. That meta currency would be Patrick Sway. Kind of like the idea of a courage point to avoid or counter offer. Okay. All right. I kind of think so too. So, because I like the, fates. We've talked about fate quite a bit here, and I do like things about fate, and that kind of does introduce this additional twist into here. Because right here, this is, as it's written in low stakes, this is very powerful. Okay, you've got sway, so one of the things you can do is voluntarily give it to another player to persuade the target character to undertake an action that complies with your character's desires. Okay. We'll come up with exactly where to put this here, but we can say, in some circumstances, the target player, let me put this up so we can see here. The target player, hey, we have 32 people watching across all the different platforms. So welcome to everybody. I'm not sure where everybody is because we're live streaming on several different, not only YouTube channels, but on Facebook as well. And, well, of course, always on Twitch. So I don't know where you are looking, but it's wonderful to have you this morning. We're live streaming on the Heath's Geekverse channel, whereas ordinarily where the show is live. But because we're talking about something cultist related, I put this out on all of the cultists' social media as well. So if you're watching on those, welcome, welcome, welcome. It is great to have you. Let's see. So in some circumstances, the target player may not want to comply mean, you could make it as easy as, okay, no, I don't want to do that. And so I don't take the sway. But I think it should cost something. So if you are out of courage, that makes courage more important. But how are you getting courage? Like that's so if you're out of courage, which that kind of makes sense from the name perspective too, that, oh, well, if you have a store of courage, you may be able to resist somebody trying to manipulate you with sway. I'm going to say the target character may not want to comply with the request of the sway holder. That also kind of would make the sway person more powerful. The only to decline or to resist the sway offer is to counteroffer and return and give a courage point to the sway holder. The target should describe how he or she avoids doing what the sway holder wants, possibly through trickery, or something. The sway holder retains sway to be used later, and takes the courage point from the target. The sway holder is rebuffed. And takes the courage point from the target. There was something else I was going to say. I forget what it was. Retain sway, takes the courage point from the target. Oh, yeah, we should say if the target has no points of courage, he or she cannot rebuff manipulation by sway. Maybe manipulation is not the right word, but that's like in Fate. If you are out of Fate points, well, the compel is going to happen to you. Okay, we'll have to try that out in the coffee shop. So Sable says this is a good idea. I think so too. Tomocrat coming in from Tennessee. Hi, everybody. Another person here in the South. You know, I'm here in Alabama. It was a hot weekend today. This weekend, it felt like July. It was hot and humid. And every summer I say, hey, you know, there's no reason for me to spend another summer here in Alabama. And yet here I am again, going through it again. Okay, so we need to clean up the phraseology here. The character with sway rolls an additional die on all trouble checks. So that's an advantage to having sway right there. If you are trying to overcome one of your troubles and you have sway, you do get an extra die on that check. But also, the player with sway, I like that. At least I like mentioning that here because it's going to describe that in more detail under checks. But if you look up sway, at least you know that right there. But also, the player with sway can voluntarily give it to another player to persuade the target character. So now I think this sentence needs to be revised. Can, instead of voluntarily give it, can attempt to persuade a target character to undertake an action. To persuade a target character to undertake an action that complies with your character's desires. Okay. Describe exactly how your character uses his or her character traits to get the other character to acquiesce. It could be charm, manipulation, sound reasoning, a threat, or anything else. But it very likely will work. The targeted character may choose that the player of the targeted character may choose to comply with the wishes of the sway holder and have their character act as he or she wants. In exchange, the target takes sway or takes sway from the sway holder, from the previous player. Does that make sense? Or so let's say alternatively, the target character, the player of the target character, may not want to comply with the request of the sway holder. To resist or we should say, let me see what's going on over here in the chat. Lynn says, "Hey, we have vineyards aplenty up here in New York if you want to escape the Alabama heat." Well, that's what I was. I've thought about. Hey, you know, there are wineries in other places. Maybe I should go there. Charlie, hey Charlie, good to see you. Anand says, a while back I used a hot potato style mechanic for things like this, so perhaps sway could be framed as increasing accountability until the problem reaches the head. I used a hot potato style mechanic for this, so perhaps sway could be framed as increasing accountability. I see what you're saying here. Like, okay, who is responsible for this problem till everything falls apart? That's interesting. That's interesting. I'm not sure. Is this about responsibility or is it who's up? May not comply with the request. This can only be done, we'll make this clear from the beginning, if the target has at least 1 point of courage. If so, the target should describe how he or she avoids doing what the sway holder wants, possibly through trickery, manipulation, stubbornness, okay, I can't write, stubbornness or other sway. Might want to connect previous to where. Yeah. Oh, yep. Thank you. Got it. I'm definitely going to read over this anyway several times before we go. In exchange, the character takes sway from the previous player. Alternatively, the player of the target character may not want to comply with the request of the sway holder. This can only be done if the target has at least 1 point of courage. If so, the target may describe how he or she avoids doing what the sway holder wants, possibly through trickery, manipulation, stubbornness, or any other means. The sway holder is rebuffed and retains sway to be used later. And the target must give 1 point of courage. So that really powers up so if you hold sway, you do have power in this. So I mean, you're feeling powerful because you can say, listen, I want this to happen. I want you to go and do this. And if they don't have courage, then they're going to have to do it. If they do have courage, they could rebuff you, but then you're going to get another point of courage. Give 1 point of courage. Give 1 point of courage to the sway holder. Okay. Let's read that. Alternatively, the player of the target character may not want to comply with the request of the sway holder. This can only be done if the target has at least 1 point of courage. If so, the target may describe how he or she avoids doing what the sway holder wants, possibly through trickery, manipulation, stubbornness, or any other means. The only way to resist the offer of sway is to counteroffer. We don't need that sentence anymore. If so, the target may describe how he or she avoids doing what the sway holder wants, possibly through trickery, manipulation, stubbornness, or any other means. The sway holder is rebuffed and retains sway to be used later, and the target must give 1 point of courage to the sway holder. If the target has no points of courage, he or she cannot rebuff the manipulation by sway. That sounds pretty good. Let's do a read through of that before we go on. Like I said, I'll make sure everything is polished before off of live stream. But let's see here. I don't know anything about this. Kasha saw. We do not have any of that. Kind of like whiskey. We've got whiskey around. We've got bourbon. I've never heard of that. Lynn says, yes, I have the soul of a copy editor. And boy, did he put up a fight. Okay, so this is what sway is. We were doing this because we're about to go into trouble checks and sway checks. So sway. When a character has sway, it means that character has the upper hand among their fellow cultists. Perhaps they have impressed the other characters in some way or otherwise earned their respect. Only one player can have sway at a time, and unlike with courage, characters cannot store sway. A character either has it or they do not. If another player gains sway, it's lost by the player who had it. An easily identifiable token or other object should be used to indicate which player's character has sway at the table. However, if no such token or object is available, sway can be marked on the character sheet. The character with sway rolls an additional die on all trouble checks. That's coming up. But also the player with sway can attempt to persuade a target character to undertake an action that complies. Yours shouldn't be here. But also the player with sway, the player character with sway can attempt to persuade a target character to undertake an action that complies with his or her character's desires. That's the right sentence. The character with sway rolls an additional die on all trouble checks, but also the player character with sway can attempt to persuade a target character to undertake an action that complies with his or her character's desires. Describe how your character uses his or her character traits to get the other player to acquiesce. It could be charm, manipulation. I say manipulation here too. Is charm too close to flattery? It could be charm, flattery, sound reasoning, a threat, or anything else, but it's very likely to work. The player of the target character may choose to comply with the wishes of the sway holder and have their character act and have their character and undertake the desired action. In exchange, the target takes sway from the previous player. Alternatively, the player of the target character may not want to comply with the request of the sway holder. This can only be done if the target has at least 1 point of courage. If so, the target may describe how he or she avoids doing what the sway holder wants, possibly through trickery, manipulation, stubbornness, or any other means. The sway holder is rebuffed and retains sway to be used later, and the target must give 1 point of courage to the sway holder. I'm going to put that in bold and italics. If the target has no points of courage, he or she cannot rebuff manipulation by sway. I like that. I like that. Okay, so that is courage and sway. But then we move into checks. How are we doing on time here? Okay, let's keep going. Here is a check. So we needed greater clarification on the check. So this has been great, guys. We need greater clarification on the checks. And I started to separate this. So there's a checks heading, and then there's going to be a section on trouble checks. And probably this should be like that. We'll take a look at all the headings when Brianna is working on final layout, but trying to keep it structured over here in Scrivener. So we say checks. Most of the time, when a player describes the action his or her character takes, that action is automatically successful. Other players react to it, and the story moves forward. However, there are two circumstances where players must roll dice, called making a check, to determine the success or failure of an action. A player must make a check whenever 1, their character attempts to gain sway with their fellow cultists by using one of their sway skills, or 2, when they attempt a task involving one of their troubles. And the final thing I'm going to do as we pass through those narrative roles again is make sure that we have a complete understanding of what troubles are. Oh, skydiving training. Well, that sounds like fun, Zero. Yes. Hey, if you've got skydiving training, you can cut out of the morning grind early. No problem. All right. A player must make, or when they attempt a task involving one of their troubles. A character may only attempt 1 check per scene, and only then if it makes sense within the structure of the story being told. So this is not something like in Dungeons & Dragons where you're going to be rolling dice for checks all the time. I swing the sword, I jump over this pit, rolling. A character may only, this comes from low stakes, a character may only attempt 1 check per scene, and only then if it makes sense within the structure of the story being told. Players may only use sway skills when it makes sense in the scene for the character. That's probably redundant. Yeah, let's remove that sentence right there. A character may only attempt 1 check per scene, and only then if it makes sense within the structure of the story being told. For example, the lackey has the sway skill, impress someone with your attention to detail and focus. But if that skill is not relevant to the story being told in the scene, it cannot be used. It's not relevant to the scene. It cannot be used. Players are free to argue their case if they see some particular way the skill may indeed be relevant, but players should mutually agree as to when skills can be used and checks should be made. However, the game will be more fun if there's a bias for action and characters are allowed to at least try what they want to do. Players are frequently allowed to at least try what they want to do. To make a check, roll a single 6-sided die and see if it meets or exceeds a difficulty DC. DCs for trouble checks are always 6. DCs for sway skill checks are always 5. If the die equals or exceeds the DC, the action is successful. Players may improve the characters. Let's move, however, here. Players may improve their character's chance of success in 2 ways. 1, roll an additional die for every point of courage spent. You may spend as many points as courage points as your character has in his or her reserve. 2, the player with sway rolls an additional die on any check they make. When multiple dice are rolled on a check, at least one die must equal or exceed the DC of the check for any action to be successful. Anytime a check is failed, you must introduce a headache into the game. So there we go. What do we think about that passage? To me, that tells you what checks are in general and gives you the general rules for adjudicating a check. I didn't realize the one has to jump out of an airplane. It's a very captive audience here. If you want to leave, you have to go jump out of an airplane. Mike says, always good to pay attention during sky. Yeah, don't try to listen to this while on earphones or something while you're doing skydiving training. Oh, Anon, this is interesting. The rules for sway here make it far better to hold rather than pass, which is bad because it's ultimately a spotlight mechanic, and holders should be more likely to encounter trouble, not less. Okay, let's think about that. The rules for sway here make it far better to hold rather than pass, which is bad because it's ultimately a spotlight mechanic, and holders should be more likely to encounter trouble, not less. So you don't like that they... Okay, well, first of all, let's also look at this up here. So there is the sway holder, but there is also a character who is the lead. No, this is interesting. So the lead character right here, players should collectively select a character to be the lead in the initial scene. The lead character is central to the scene, with much of the action focused on or around him or her. This character begins the game with sway. When a scene concludes, the player of that scene's lead selects a new lead for the subsequent scene. The chosen player character becomes the primary focus of the new scene, with the majority of the action centered on him or her. The previous lead transitions to the role of scene moderator for the next scene. See below. The lead passes around the table in this way until everyone has had a turn. Once every player has been the lead, the round is complete. The previous lead chooses a new lead and play continues with a new round. Everyone does not need to get an equal number of turns as the lead during the game. As long as everyone has had a turn, allow the game to conclude when the story naturally comes to an end. Note that the lead in a scene does not automatically start the scene with sway after the start of the game. After the first scene, sway will rotate among the players according to its own rules. See sway. So there is the lead, this idea of the lead as well. In the very first scene, the player who has the lead will also have sway. But that's not the case after the first scene. So in the context of also having a lead, let's go down here and reread what Anon said. It says, the rules for sway make it far better to hold rather than pass. I think I agree that if you are the sway holder, you are getting to roll an additional check on any die you make, on any check you make, which is going to be your trouble checks. That's not trouble coming to you. That's you overcoming your trouble. Remember, the trouble does two things. The trouble tells you what kinds of things, and we're going to make sure that's clarified. What the trouble is going to tell you, like, what is it that generally makes your character, makes things difficult for your character because of some personality trait or something like that you've got. And if you want to overcome that, you've got to make a trouble check. So if you are a sway holder, then you do get an additional die on that. And this does say a player with sway rolls an additional die on any check they make. But the only check that you're going to be making as a sway holder is a trouble check. if you're trying to avoid your trouble or pass on despite, in spite of your trouble, you're not going to be making another sway check. Sway checks are used to acquire sway. Rolls an additional die. So rather than saying any die, any check they make, rolls an additional die on any trouble check they make. Because there are only so many types of checks here. So you may roll an additional die for every point of courage spent, and if you have sway, you get an additional die. And then you also have this additional rule with sway that you can make somebody do what you want, or they're going to have to give you courage. Let's see. Also, why pass it when you can just persuade characters through role-playing? You can persuade characters through role-playing. So I think you can persuade characters through role-playing. So the way it was originally written is that because in this case, you're basically putting a compel on somebody. Anybody at any time, whether or not you've got sway or you do not have sway, you can try to convince somebody to do something through role-playing. Not a problem. Anybody can do that. The sway holder, though, has an additional, like a trump card, basically, on that. Anybody can try to convince anybody to do something through role-playing, but the sway holder can pass it to basically compel it to happen. Because if that person doesn't have courage, then they're going to have to do it. And if they do have courage, if they don't want to do it, then they're going to have to give up that point of courage. So anybody can just try through role-playing to get people to do stuff. Absolutely. But the sway is the trump card that can come down. So what if they have to expend courage to retain, burns through it to resist, or use without making someone else do something? If they have to expend courage to retain, burns through it to resist, or to use without making someone else do something. I'm not exactly sure what's going here. I don't completely understand that, Micah. So when multiple dice are rolled for a check. All right, so let's go to trouble checks. Trouble checks. Trouble checks should only be made when there are clear stakes for a character regarding whether or not they will overcome their trouble. So that's the trouble checks. We should are made when a character wants to act against their ordinary wants to interact against their nature, against part of their nature that ordinarily makes life difficult for them. Should we make a reference here to see troubles? Like a reference to that? Trouble checks should only be made when there are clear stakes. Do it this way. For the characters regarding clear stakes for the character regarding whether or not they will overcome their trouble. If the conflicted just has to choose between grabbing a pizza with the cultists or getting beer with the band, a trouble check is likely not warranted. Dave gives in to his default state and goes with the band. However, we give an example here. Yeah, let's move this down. Character regarding whether or not they will overcome their trouble. So trouble checks are made when a character wants to act against part of their nature that ordinarily makes life difficult for them. See troubles, page YYY. Trouble checks should only be made when there is clear stakes for the character regarding whether or not they will overcome their trouble. If there are not, if there would be no consequence, for giving in to the trouble, then no trouble check should be rolled. Example, Dave, the casual cultist of Cthulhu, is heavily involved with his band in the mundane world and so plays the narrative role of the conflicted. One of his troubles is resist the temptations of the mundane world. This means that Dave is usually distracted from the cult by the band and all of its activities. That's a reoccurring story beat for his character. When temptation arises, Dave gives in. However, when the band's temptation arises, Dave gives in. However, there may be a critical point in the narrative where Dave must resist that temptation so as to prioritize joining the cult for an important ritual rather than going to band practice. Because the ritual is so important, the players believe it's narratively appropriate for Dave to try to resist the band and join the cultists instead. Therefore, Dave's player can make a trouble check to see if Dave resists temptation. So I could say, up this here, if Dave if the band's temptation, Dave gives in. Trouble check, yeah. Situation, a trouble check, and generally use a few points. Yeah, so we'll just put that up here. Therefore, Dave's player can make a trouble check. Dave might even want to expend a few points of courage to ensure this, to help ensure this check is successful. There we go. All right, so that means that can go. If you succeed at a trouble check, your character successfully accomplishes the action in spite of the fact no one expected them to, and the character gains 2 courage points. If you fail, you must introduce a headache into the game. So headaches are like the complications. So if you succeed at a trouble check, your character successfully accomplishes the action. Your character acts counter to their worst nature, to that part of their nature. Acts counter to, successfully accomplishes the action that no one expected them to, and the character gains 2 courage points. If you fail, you must introduce a headache into the game. How does that sound? Ridiculous? Bad? Okay, failing the example for the conflicted here means not being part of whatever scene they're in and taking sway with them if they had it. I think that's a great point. That in this example, in the example that I have written here, and I thought about that. In this example right here, Dave's character exits the scene. Or possibly does. I mean, that's, but this one would be a big one. So can we come up with a different example? We got stuff up here. Let me scroll up here. Anon says, I get that, and sway holders should have a harder time overcoming their trouble. Or else, why else pass it? Oh, you want the player to have. So what's the benefit of having sway? So you think that it should be more difficult to pass a trouble check if you have sway. That would mean that the benefit of having sway would be that you can make it compel on another character. Am I following that right here? Sway hold. So you would make it more difficult. Well, does that mean that you're trying to encourage people to pass sway? But you can get, so there is also sway check. So sway checks are made when a player, and I haven't finished writing this section out here, but sway checks are made when the player character wants to use one of her special sway skills to get a leg up on your fellow cultists. Only one player can attempt a sway skill check in a scene. Only one player can attempt a sway skill check during a scene to gain sway. To be eligible to make a skill check, the player must undertake a narrative action that would garner favorable attention from others or earn their respect, even if only temporarily. The lead has priority in making sway skill checks, followed by other players, and finally the scene moderator. So I was starting to write an example of the critic has the sway skill, persuade someone through harsh criticism. If you succeed at a sway skill check, your character gains sway among the cultists. The character who previously had sway loses it. If you fail, you must introduce a headache into the game. So my understanding, the way that the low stakes was set up, is that players are going to be attempting sway skill checks using the things that they are good at to undertake a narrative action that would garner favorable attention from others and earn their respect, even if only temporarily, and giving them sway. And then while you're holding it, you're going to get +1 bonus to your trouble checks, and then also have the ability to force a compel to somebody else. But somebody else is going to come along next scene and try to take that from you. And priority is given to the lead in a scene. And I think I understand why that is, because if you are the lead in a scene, you may not have sway, because I'm thinking about some scenes where Ben is down. Ben is down, but now the scene comes and focuses on him. So he may choose to do something as the lead that's going to impress everybody. I'm down at the moment, but now I'm the lead of this scene. The scene's focused on me. I'm going to have priority in making a sway skill check if I want to take sway from the other person who had it. So, you think being able to pass it is confusing things? I mean, it does seem like having sway is pretty powerful. You do get the +1, but it seems like by design in low stakes here. So you get the +1 to your trouble checks, +1 die to your trouble checks, and you can potentially compel someone. But other people are going to be trying to take this from you. But James Anon says it should be harder to overcome troubles, or why else pass it? If it's harder to overcome troubles, why would you want it? Right? If it makes it more difficult for you to overcome troubles, why would you try to undertake sway checks? So Micah says, if courage is expended to keep the sway, then players burn courage faster to keep overcoming their troubles. If players try to counter-offer the sway action requested, they're burning courage and can resist if they have no courage. If players try to counter-offer the sway action requested, they're burning courage and can't resist. Correct. Yes, that's correct. Yes. So that way, both sides are using courage if the sway isn't being passed freely to someone who accepts it. All right, let's think more about that. Maybe that goes with what Anon is saying. So maybe Micah and Anon are thinking in the same way. PH says, at my system, we don't have initiative. We use the lead or focus mechanic. The spotlight rotates among us, and every person has to act every time. The lead can make more decisive actions, while the others indirect actions. The indirect actions count and prepare strategies. I found this really helped everyone to stay on the edge and paying attention. Yeah, and 2 courage points per success. Yeah, I'll definitely keep sway indefinitely if I ever got it. Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose you could keep sway indefinitely. I mean, every scene, somebody's going to try to take it from you. I mean, right? But it does sound like having sway is a good thing, right? What are the consequences for a failed test that uses sway? A normal failure would be something, but using sway and failing may cause resentment or something. You pushed too hard and still failed. Anytime you fail a check, you must introduce a headache into the game. So if you failed in your attempt to gain sway, you introduce a headache into the game. If you attempt a trouble check, then you fail, you introduce a headache into the game. So that is normal failure. Normal failure is adding a headache into the game. There's no like normal failure and critical failure and so forth. It's just, hey, if you fail, if you're going to, I'm going to try to do this check. If I succeed, then I get what I want. If I don't, then I have to introduce a complication, a headache into the game. Can you accumulate courage? Yes. If so, can you require spending it to compel someone and courage to resist that compulsion? Okay, so Lynn is also saying sway seems too important to pass to another player to compel them to do something. Okay, so then what if, maybe this addresses what, maybe this kind of works with what Lynn and Anon were saying. What if you remove that idea of the compel from having sway, and instead you move that just to the courage points? And then it really does become a more fate-like mechanic, right? Okay, I was thinking about this in a couple of different ways. But you could say then, all right, you can manipulate, you can try to get people to do things through role playing. You can absolutely do that. Or anybody can say, hey, I want you to do this. And I'm describing how I, can try to convince you to do whatever that is. And if you do it, I'll give you a courage point. And that person can either choose to accept that courage point and do the thing, whatever it is, or reject that courage or reject it. But then they have to give up a courage point to them. So you think just moving that off of sway is the way to go? Micah says, the way to get the least headaches is to avoid burning courage too fast. Pass it to someone willing, and then you don't burn your courage as fast. Convince them so they don't resist with their own courage, Micah says. Yep. So that's what Lynn was saying. Yep, that's what I was getting at. Make it strictly a contest of courage points. When everyone is burning courage too quickly. They're more likely to fail and cause headaches from failures. Can sway rolls be resisted in any way? No, there's not. That sway is not a resistance thing. So, like, what is this? A sway skill. So, a sway skill could be complain until you get your way. Impress others with your style and panache. Improve another by being his or her wingman or fin man. Make someone else feel cool. So, like, no one's it's not set up so that someone is resisting your sway skill check. Anon, would moving removing the giving up sway be part of would that help your situation? PH talking to Lynn says to use courage to counter a sway diminishes the sway importance. I think there should be another currency more difficult to obtain. Oh, I agree. There does seem to be some asymmetry there. That if you've got sway and you're sending this over, can you resist with just courage? With courage, I think it's simple enough that you just need two. You courage and then sway is probably enough because you also have the lead character. Yeah, I know. So introducing, so I like sway being the. I mean, sway should be good. So it seems like then this right here. So it seems like we're kind of going to a character with sway rolls an additional die on all trouble checks. That's your advantage. And then you would move, it seems like you being collective you, this idea of the compel over to courage. So courage points could be accumulated, but players will want to spend them to improve the chances he or she is successful at checks involving one of their troubles. But that also you can use courage to try to get other characters to do things. Is this going in a better direction? Does that make sense that if you've got a courage point, like, hey, I want you to go over there and do whatever, and I'll attach a courage point to it. And somebody says, no, I don't want to do that. They can't just reject your courage point. They're going to have to use one of their courage points to give to you. So if you've got a courage point and you're going to use it on a compel on somebody, you're either going to get them to do what you wanted, or you're going to get another courage point. Let's make note here. Should this be courage? And actually, this even brings up the point. I'm going to have to go in just a few minutes. But this also brings up an interesting point. So I guess we'll have to think about this next time. I'm going to have to come back and think about this. And I keep thinking we're moving into characters, and we're not. There's still more to do here. So could we talk about this tomorrow? Could we do a Monday grind? I really like to think through it some more myself when I get back from the winery this evening. If I'm able to do that, we could do a morning grind in the morning. Monday morning. Let's see. Oh, resisting somebody's attempt to seize it away. No, if you've got sway, so not as the way that it's currently set up. So if somebody else is it's their turn, it's the lead character's time. They're going to try to do something that's going to be impressive with the cultist. There is no way at that moment to resist it. Now there is later, let's see, ending the game, concluding the story. This is the way low stakes concludes the story, concluding the game. As the game progresses, there will come a point where the storyline seems near its resolution, signaling the game's impending conclusion. When this moment arrives, the player possessing sway may choose to initiate the conclusion of the story. However, before the scene concludes, another player has the opportunity to attempt to gain sway. The challenger must make a sway skill check, and is free to spend courage points if he or she has any available. The player with sway may expend courage to counter each point spent by the challenger. Should that be just an all-the-time thing? Every point by the courage spent by the current sway holder cancels out one spent by the challenger, though the challenger must always roll at least one die. The story will move to its conclusion regardless of the outcome of the final check, but the way it concludes will change. Players should craft a finale where things ultimately work out well for the character holding sway and those who successfully pass checks involving one of their troubles at any time during the game. So if you want it to go well for your character, you need to be the final character holding sway, or you need to have passed a trouble check during the game. Other characters face a less favorable conclusion marked by embarrassment, failure, or some other adverse outcome. Should that be something that is all the time? So anytime somebody, if you've got sway, should somebody be able to counter it? You are getting courage points. If you pass your trouble check or whatever, you're getting courage points. Let's see. Sable says, is a normal failure what you turn into if you cease being a normal man? Yes, right. Yes. Mike says, having sway is about framing the scene and an extra die on check. Having sway is about framing the scene if the compel is removed. Yes. Anon says, no, that's fine. Okay. Is sway a narrative and mechanical advantage? Maybe it should be one or the other. No, PCs. I mean, I guess it could be used against NPCs, but well, your sway skill check, I think it could be against either one, because like if you do something that like overcomes a whole bunch of NPCs, then your esteem and your esteem may go up with the cultists. So if you're talking about using sway skill checks, that could be used on anybody, and just a character, PC or NPC. All right. Well, you guys once again gave me a lot to think about. So this has been amazing once again. So this was really good. I'm going to try to think about this this afternoon or this evening when I get back in. We've been going for an hour and a half. So this is a good session. And if I'm able to do that, then we'll reconvene in the morning again. Do a morning grind, do a Monday morning grind to go over this again. So as long as sway can be seized in this manner, the benefits make sense. Okay. All right. Because I think this was important, though, like dividing out, I guess I hadn't finished writing the sway thing right here. So we'll work on that. So I'll work on that section, then we'll go there, because that seems to be like we're moving through this. I do want to be sure that we've got I know this was a thing with Anon as well, to make sure that the troubles are written well and everyone understands their meaning. I want to be sure of that as we go through here. All right. So, I got to get out of here because I've got things I got to do. So I'll work on that. I'll see you let me put the link to the Discord server. If you're new here, Discord server, Ravenkeep Discord server. Let me drop this link. I would love it if you would hang with us, subscribe to wherever you are, wherever you're watching the stream. We got, I noticed we had 40 people watching. So that's fantastic. Please do like the stream. However you found us, if you're not part of the Discord server, would love for you to come in and be part of the Discord server. Hopefully I'll work on this tonight. And then see you tomorrow. I hope to see you tomorrow. Look in the Discord server. I'll let you know if we're coming in tomorrow. Otherwise, it'll be Wednesday. Later, everybody. Have a good day. Go forth, be creative, and be constructive.